The sun had begun to dip behind the distant hills, casting long shadows across the forest floor. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of pine and damp earth, a reminder of the day's brief rain. The Apache warrior moved silently through the underbrush, his bare feet barely making a sound against the soft soil. He had wandered this land for weeks, traveling far from his tribe after a disagreement that had left him estranged. His people, strict and unyielding in their ways, could not accept the choices he had made, and so he had chosen solitude over conflict. Freedom, however, was not always as peaceful as he imagined. It carried with it the weight of loneliness and constant caution. As he walked, he kept his senses alert. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, set his instincts on edge. Years of training and survival in the wild had honed his abilities, but the world beyond the forest was unpredictable. Settlers and travelers moved through these lands, often suspicious and hostile toward anyone they did not recognize. Yet he continued, guided by a mixture of curiosity and the hope of finding a place where he could rest, if only for a short time. It was near a small clearing that he first noticed the signs of trouble. The grass was trampled, and the remains of a small fire smoldered weakly, surrounded by scattered belongings. He crouched behind a tree, observing carefully. Among the debris, her hair was tangled and damp, clinging to her face, and her hands shook as she tried to gather what little she could salvage. The warrior could see the fear in her eyes, the way she glanced over her shoulder as if expecting someone or something to appear at any moment. He remained hidden for a few moments, weighing his options. The rules of his own life had always been simple: survive, protect oneself, and avoid entanglements. But something about her vulnerability stirred a deep, unfamiliar impulse within him. He knew what it meant to be alone, to be forced to rely on one's own strength and wit to survive, and he recognized that same struggle in her. The decision was not immediate, but it did not take long for him to move forward. Carefully, he stepped out from behind the trees, making his presence known without startling her. "Do not be afraid," he said, his voice calm but firm, carrying the weight of authority born from experience. The woman froze, her eyes wide with fear. She had no idea who he was, only that he was unlike the travelers she had seen before. His skin was tanned and marked with the stories of countless seasons in the wild. His eyes were sharp and observant, scanning not just her, but the surrounding forest for any sign of danger. For a moment, she wondered if he might be a threat, but there was no malice in his demeanor, only caution, only readiness. Slowly, she lowered her hands and nodded, a silent acknowledgement that she understood he meant no immediate harm. The warrior approached, moving with the careful grace of someone accustomed to both the wilderness and the delicate nature of human trust. He knelt down near the scattered items, examining them with practiced eyes. "Your home," he said softly, almost to himself. "It has been destroyed." She nodded again, unable to speak. Her voice caught in her throat, and a tear slid down her cheek. The warrior handed her a piece of cloth he carried, a simple strip of fabric he used for emergencies. "Cover yourself. You are exposed." The woman hesitated, then accepted it, wrapping it around her shoulders. She was no longer a stranger. There was a recognition in her eyes, a glimmer of relief that someone had appeared to help. The Apache observed her closely. She was frightened, yes, but there was also strength in her posture, even as she trembled. She had faced loss and devastation, yet she had not given in entirely. That resilience drew him in, capturing his attention in a way few had before. Readers, ingrations are reading 17. He spoke again, carefully choosing his words. "The forest is dangerous at night. Predators move, and humans may not be kind." She swallowed hard, nodding in silent agreement. "I will help you," he added. "But you must follow my instructions. There is no other way to stay safe. The woman's eyes widened, a mixture of gratitude and fear. She had no choice, and yet the calm authority in his voice offered a strange sense of comfort. She had felt the chaos of the past days closing in on her like a storm, and now there was someone offering protection, a guide through the uncertainty. For hours, they moved through the forest together. The warrior led her along hidden paths, avoiding worn trails where travelers or hunters might be. He taught her how to move quietly, how to watch for signs of animals or humans, and how to read the subtle cues of the forest. Each instruction was given gently, yet with the certainty of someone who had lived his entire life in tune with nature. She listened intently, absorbing every word, and gradually, the tension in her shoulders began to ease. As night fell, they reached a small, hidden clearing. The warrior knelt and arranged a simple campsite, using branches and leaves to create shelter from the cold night air. He started a small fire, careful to keep it low, its light flickering across their faces. The woman sat near the warmth, wrapping herself tighter in the cloth he had given her. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was a shared acknowledgement of the day's events. A quiet moment of reprieve. He watched her closely, noting the exhaustion etched on her face. She had been through much more than most could imagine, and yet she had endured. The warrior felt a rare pang of admiration for her resilience. He had spent years in the wild, learning to trust no one, to rely solely on himself. Yet here, in this moment, he found a strange sense of connection forming. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there a spark of something that went beyond mere survival. As they settled for the night, he kept his senses alert, aware of every sound in the forest. Owls hooted in the distance, and the rustling of leaves hinted at nocturnal creatures moving about. He did not sleep immediately, instead watching over her, ensuring that she remained safe. She, in turn, drifted into a light sleep, comforted by the presence of someone who had chosen to protect her. In that moment, a fragile trust began to take root, delicate yet undeniable. By the time dawn broke, painting the forest in soft shades of gold and green, the warrior and the woman had both learned something about each other. She had learned that not all strangers brought harm, that kindness could exist even in the harshest circumstances. He had learned that there were connections worth making, that protecting someone did not always lead to loss, and that the bonds formed in the midst of struggle could be profound. The events of that night were only the beginning, a first step in a journey that would test both of them in ways neither could yet imagine. As the sun rose higher, they prepared to move again, their paths now intertwined. The warrior had chosen to step into her life, despite the risks to his freedom, and the woman, once alone and desperate, had found someone willing to stand by her side. The forest around them seemed less threatening now, not because the danger had vanished, but because they would face it together. The bond forged in those hours of fear, compassion, and quiet understanding would shape everything that followed, setting the stage for a story of courage, trust, and the difficult choices that come with the heart's deepest callings. The morning sunlight filtered through the trees, casting soft patterns on the forest floor as the Apache warrior and the young woman prepared to continue their journey. The night had been quiet, with only the occasional rustle of leaves or distant bird call breaking the silence. She had slept better than she had in days, the presence of the warrior giving her a sense of safety she had almost forgotten existed. Yet, despite the comfort, an undercurrent of fear remained. Life in the wilderness was unpredictable, and she knew that every step forward carried new risks. The warrior moved with his usual calm and precision, scanning the area ahead for signs of danger. His eyes missed nothing: the subtle break in the grass, the faint footprints in the dirt, even the smell of animals in the air. He had spent his life learning to read the land, to anticipate threats before they became immediate. Now, he took on the added responsibility of ensuring her safety. Teaching her to survive, even in small ways, became part of his purpose. He knew that strength came not just from physical skill, but also from knowledge and understanding. As they walked, he began to teach her some basic survival skills. "Always watch where you step," he instructed, pointing to a section of ground scattered with loose rocks. "A misstep can alert animals or other people to your presence. Move quietly, with purpose, but do not rush." She tried to follow his guidance, lifting her feet carefully and keeping her movements deliberate. At first, her attempts were clumsy, causing a few small twigs to snap underfoot. The warrior merely shook his head with a faint smile, offering gentle corrections rather than criticism. Over time, she improved. She learned to notice subtle signs in the environment, the flattened grass indicating a recent passage of deer, the broken branch hinting at a small predator, the distant sound of running water that could guide them to safety. The warrior watched her progress with quiet approval, impressed by her determination and resilience. It was not easy for someone unaccustomed to the wilderness, but she absorbed each lesson with a mix of curiosity and concentration that reminded him of his younger days. They paused mid-morning to rest near a small stream, its water clear and cool. The woman knelt at the edge, cupping her hands to drink, while the warrior stood nearby, scanning the surroundings. He had learned long ago that moments of vulnerability required vigilance. Danger often appeared when people let their guard down. She noticed his constant watchfulness and felt a mixture of gratitude and awe. Here was someone who had chosen to protect her without expecting anything in return, who acted with skill, patience, and a deep understanding of the world around them. "Your movements," he said quietly, "are improving. Soon, you will notice things you never paid attention to before. The forest has its language. Learn it, and you will survive." She nodded, her eyes bright with eagerness. "I want to learn," she said. "I want to be able to take care of myself." Her words carried determination, but also vulnerability. She had been forced to face hardship alone for so long, and the thought of gaining some control over her circumstances was empowering. The warrior felt a quiet respect for her resolve. As the day wore on, they continued moving through the forest, encountering small challenges along the way. Fallen trees blocked their path, requiring careful climbing and balance. The undergrowth was thick in some areas, scratching at their clothing and skin. Insects buzzed and bit, and the sun grew hot overhead. Each obstacle was a test, not only of endurance, but also of trust between them. She learned to rely on him, following his guidance, and he learned to recognize her strengths and adapt his teaching to her abilities. By afternoon, the forest began to thin, revealing a more open landscape. The warrior paused on a hill, looking out over a small valley, dotted with wildflowers and patches of sunlight. "We will rest here for a while," he said. "The view is good, and it allows us to see anyone approaching from a distance." She sank onto a rock, exhausted but exhilarated by the journey so far. The beauty of the valley, combined with the sense of safety she felt beside him, brought a rare smile to her face. For the first time in days, she felt a sense of peace, even amidst the uncertainty of her situation. While she rested, he showed her how to make a small, concealed shelter using branches and leaves. "You must always have a safe place to retreat to," he explained. "Even a small shelter can save your life if danger comes unexpectedly." She listened intently, helping to weave the branches together, learning to see the forest not just as a place of beauty, but also as a place of potential hazards and resources. Each lesson reinforced the growing trust between them, creating a bond that went beyond simple survival. As evening approached, they gathered firewood and built a small, controlled fire. The flames flickered and danced, casting warm light over their faces. She watched him work with efficiency and care, noting how his hands moved with skill born of years of practice. "You make it look easy," she said, a hint of admiration in her voice. He shook his head, replying, "Experience teaches you many things, but patience is the greatest lesson. Without it, survival is nearly impossible." His words resonated with her, and she found herself thinking about patience not just in terms of survival, but in life as well. They shared a simple meal of gathered roots, nuts, and a small portion of dried meat he had carried. She had never eaten in such a quiet, mindful way before, noticing the flavors and textures as though each bite mattered more than it did in the rush of daily life. Conversation flowed cautiously at first, with him asking about her past and her family, and her responding in measured, careful words. There was an unspoken understanding between them. Certain topics were safe, others required time and trust. Yet even in that limited space, a deeper connection began to grow, built on shared experience and mutual respect. As night fell, the temperature dropped, and they wrapped themselves in blankets and cloth to stay warm. The warrior kept watch while she slept, listening to the subtle sounds of the forest, the distant call of an owl, the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush, the whisper of wind through the trees. Each sound reminded him of the delicate balance between danger and safety, and of the responsibility he had taken on. She stirred occasionally, murmuring in her sleep, and he adjusted the fire to keep her comfortable. It was a quiet, intimate care that required no words, a silent acknowledgement of the bond forming between them. Through that night, he realized something new about himself. He had always valued freedom above all else, but protecting her and teaching her skills gave his life a purpose he had not felt in years. He had wandered alone, surviving day by day. But now there was someone who depended on him, whose trust he had earned. And with that trust came a sense of connection he could not ignore. The world was vast and unpredictable, yet in the presence of her vulnerability and resilience, he discovered a quiet fulfillment that even freedom alone could not provide. By the time dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky with hues of pink and gold, the woman awoke with a sense of anticipation. She felt stronger, more capable, and more confident than she had in days. She looked at the warrior and realized that he was not just a protector, but also a teacher, a guide, and a companion. He, in turn, observed her with a mixture of pride and caution. Their journey had only just begun, and yet the trust between them had grown considerably. Each step forward would require cooperation, patience, and courage. But they were no longer strangers facing the wilderness alone. As they packed their belongings and prepared to move once more, there was a sense of quiet determination between them. They understood that the challenges ahead would be many, but they also knew that they had each other. The warrior had taught her the first lessons in survival, and in doing so, had begun to show her that she was stronger than she realized. She had shown him that connection, trust, and loyalty could exist even in the harshest circumstances. Together, they stepped forward into the unknown, ready to face whatever the world had in store, guided by mutual respect, shared purpose, and the beginnings of a bond that would grow stronger with each passing day. The day had been long, and the sun had begun its slow descent behind the distant hills, casting golden light across the valley. The Apache warrior and the young woman had been traveling steadily, moving through thick forest, crossing shallow streams, and carefully avoiding areas where travelers or settlers might be nearby. Though the journey had been difficult, it had also been full of small lessons, discoveries, and moments of quiet connection. She had grown stronger, more confident, and he had noticed, with a quiet sense of pride, her ability to survive and adapt. Yet the evening carried with it a tension neither had faced before. As they approached a secluded clearing near a small river, the woman stopped and took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the area with a mix of relief and apprehension. The river flowed gently, its surface catching the fading light and sparkling like scattered diamonds. For a moment, the world seemed calm, almost peaceful, and the stresses of their long journey softened. She glanced at the Apache warrior, noticing the way his posture remained alert, how every sense seemed to be attuned to the slightest movement or sound. She had learned to trust him, to rely on his judgment, but she also understood that his life had been one of constant vigilance. They settled near the riverbank, the warrior carefully arranging a small fire while she gathered dry leaves and twigs to help keep it going. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and the faint aroma of the river. As they worked together, a quiet understanding passed between them, a rhythm of cooperation built on trust, shared experience, and the recognition that they were no longer alone. She moved with confidence now, guided by the lessons he had patiently taught her, and he allowed her to take small responsibilities, watching carefully but letting her gain independence. After the fire was ready, they sat close together, letting its warmth chase away the chill. The warrior handed her a small piece of dried meat, which she accepted with a faint smile. For a few moments, they ate in silence, listening to the soothing sounds of the river and the gentle rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. There was a softness in this moment, a brief respite from the constant awareness of danger. She realized she felt something she had not felt in a long time: safety, comfort, and a sense of being cared for. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet, almost trembling. "I have faced so many hardships, and yet, here with you, I feel." She hesitated, searching for the right words. The warrior looked at her, his expression calm but attentive, sensing the depth of her vulnerability. He did not interrupt. He merely waited, giving her the space to express what she had been holding inside. She lifted her eyes to meet his, her gaze filled with a mixture of fear, hope, and longing. "Please, only tonight," she whispered, barely audible over the soft crackle of the fire. The words hung in the air, carrying a weight that neither of them could ignore. For a moment, the warrior was silent, his mind racing. His life had always been about freedom, freedom from rules, freedom from obligations, freedom from attachments that could tie him down or put him at risk. And yet, in that instant, he felt something entirely different. A pull toward loyalty, care, and a connection that went beyond mere survival. He studied her closely, observing the trust she placed in him, the courage it took to speak her needs so openly. He understood the risk she had taken, revealing her vulnerability to someone she barely knew but had come to trust. In her eyes, he saw more than fear. He saw hope, dependence, and the quiet belief that he would not abandon her. That realization stirred a conflict within him, one he had not experienced before. His mind weighed the options: to continue living as he always had, free and unbound, or to stay, risking his own safety to protect someone who had captured his heart. The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment, the forest seemed to hold its breath. He could hear the distant call of a bird settling for the night, the soft gurgle of the river flowing past, and the faint crackle of the fire between them. Time seemed to slow, and every detail of the moment etched itself into his mind. He had survived countless dangers, faced countless enemies, and endured hardships that would have broken many. Yet the choice before him was different. It was not about survival or skill, but about the heart, loyalty, and the courage to care for another. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady but gentle. "You are not alone," he said, "and tonight I will not leave your side." The words carried a promise, an acknowledgement of the bond that had grown between them. It was more than protection. It was a choice to stand with her, to share the risks, and to accept the consequences of being tied to someone else. For the warrior, it was a step into a new kind of bravery, one that required trust, vulnerability, and the willingness to put someone else's needs alongside his own. The woman's eyes filled with a mixture of relief and gratitude. She had feared rejection, abandonment, and continued isolation. But his words reassured her. In that moment, the distance between them vanished, replaced by a fragile, delicate connection built on trust and understanding. They had faced danger together, learned from each other, and shared moments of quiet companionship. And now that bond was deepening, becoming something neither could deny. As darkness fell over the forest, they remained close to the fire, the flickering flames casting soft shadows on their faces. He spoke quietly, teaching her more about reading the land, listening for the signs of predators, and understanding the subtle messages the forest offered. She absorbed every word, feeling stronger and more capable with each lesson. But beneath the practical guidance was something else. A quiet, unspoken affirmation that he was choosing to stay, that he had decided to place her needs above the absolute freedom he had once prized above all else. The night was long and still, filled with small, shared moments that spoke louder than words. She listened to his stories of the land, of the survival skills he had learned from his elders, and of the lessons life had taught him about resilience, courage, and patience. He, in turn, learned more about her fears, her hopes, and the quiet strength she carried despite everything she had endured. Each revelation brought them closer, weaving a bond that neither could have anticipated when they first met. By the time the moon reached its peak in the sky, casting silvery light across the forest, the woman felt a sense of peace she had not known in years. The warrior remained vigilant, his senses alert, but there was also a rare softness in his demeanor. He had made a choice, one that went beyond survival, beyond skill, beyond caution. He had chosen to care, to stand with her, and to accept the vulnerability that came with connection. In doing so, he had begun to discover a new kind of freedom, the freedom to belong, to trust, and to share life with another person. As dawn approached, the forest slowly stirred with life. Birds called out in the distance, and the wind whispered through the trees. She awoke with a quiet confidence, feeling stronger and more resilient than she had the day before. She looked at the warrior, who had spent the night keeping watch, and realized that he was more than a protector. He was a companion, a teacher, and someone who had chosen her when he could have walked away. That choice, simple yet profound, marked a turning point in their journey. The day ahead would bring new challenges, new obstacles, and new dangers. But for the first time, they faced the world not as strangers, but as allies, bound by trust, shared experience, and the understanding that some choices were worth the risk. The whisper of her words, "Please, only tonight," had changed the course of both their lives, teaching them that connection, loyalty, and care could be as powerful as any skill or survival tactic. Together, they stepped forward into the unknown, ready to face whatever came next, guided by courage, compassion, and the quiet strength of the bond they had forged. The morning air was crisp and filled with the scent of pine and damp earth as the Apache warrior and the young woman set out once again. The events of the previous night weighed heavily on both of them. While the woman carried a newfound sense of trust and comfort in his presence, the warrior was acutely aware of the choice he had made, staying with her rather than continuing alone in the freedom he had always cherished. The forest stretched ahead, full of hidden dangers and unseen challenges. Yet the bond they had forged gave them both courage to face the uncertain path. Their journey through the wilderness was not easy. The terrain was rough, with thick undergrowth that snagged at their clothing and hidden roots that threatened to trip them at every step. Streams had to be crossed carefully, with slippery stones and fast currents making each step a potential hazard. The warrior moved ahead with skill and precision, demonstrating the best paths, testing each footing, and helping her navigate obstacles. She followed his guidance, slowly growing more confident in her ability to move through the forest safely. Her trust in him had deepened, and she relied on both his expertise and the lessons he had taught her over the past days. As they traveled, the forest became denser, the sunlight barely piercing the canopy above. Shadows moved in the corners of her vision, and strange sounds echoed among the trees. The warrior's senses were constantly alert, He would pause, crouch low, and study the surroundings, detecting even the slightest hint of movement that could indicate danger. She had begun to understand this alertness, and even when her heart raced, she stayed calm, knowing that he was there to guide and protect her. Every snap of a branch or distant rustle reminded her of the challenges they faced, but it also strengthened her resolve. Midway through the day, they came across signs that humans had been nearby. Footprints pressed into the soft soil, remnants of a fire, and the faint glimmer of discarded metal caught the warrior's eye immediately. He motioned for her to stay quiet, lowering himself behind a thick tree trunk. Her heart beat faster, but she obeyed, recognizing the seriousness of the situation. "Some travelers may not be friendly," he whispered. "We must remain hidden until we are certain it is safe." They waited patiently, scanning the area, every sense heightened. Minutes passed, though it felt much longer, until the danger had passed and the forest returned to its natural quiet. She realized just how much she depended on him, not only for protection but also for guidance, for teaching her how to read the forest and anticipate threats. It was not merely survival skills she had learned. It was patience, awareness, and calmness in the face of fear. Her reliance on him was growing. But it was not blind. It was informed by trust, respect, and admiration for his knowledge and courage. In turn, the warrior noticed her adaptability and determination. Her willingness to learn, to face fear without giving in, made him more certain that staying with her was not a mistake. By late afternoon, exhaustion began to set in. They had traveled far and faced numerous obstacles, yet they pressed on. The warrior decided it was time to find a suitable place to rest. After careful observation, he led her to a small hilltop that provided both a clear view of the surrounding forest and natural shelter from the wind. They began to set up a modest camp, gathering dry wood for a fire and constructing a temporary shelter with branches and leaves. She worked alongside him, demonstrating the skills he had taught her, and he quietly observed, approving of her progress and resourcefulness. Once the fire was ready, they sat together, letting its warmth chase away the evening chill. The woman watched him move with skill and precision, gathering more firewood, adjusting the flames, and preparing a simple meal. Her admiration for him deepened as she realized the depth of his experience, not only in survival, but also in understanding the delicate balance of the forest. "You make this look effortless," she said quietly. He shook his head, a small smile on his lips. "Experience teaches many things, but careful attention is more important than effort," he replied, his voice calm but commanding. As night settled over the forest, they ate in silence, the fire crackling between them. The woman noticed how constantly alert he remained, scanning the darkened woods, listening for the smallest sound. The warrior had taught her to do the same, to notice, to anticipate, and to respect the dangers that lurked in the shadows. Though the forest was beautiful, it was also a place of hidden peril, and both of them knew that one misstep could lead to serious consequences. This awareness, however, did not diminish their growing bond. Rather, it reinforced their reliance on each other. During the quiet hours, they shared more about themselves. The warrior spoke of his past, of the tribe that had cast him out, of the lessons he had learned while surviving alone in the wilderness. The woman shared fragments of her life, her losses, and the struggles that had shaped her resilience. Each story, each shared memory, strengthened the connection between them. They were no longer merely traveling companions. They were allies in a world that demanded vigilance, courage, and trust. The night brought new challenges. From the shadows, small predators approached, curious and cautious. The warrior acted swiftly, guiding the woman to remain calm and move quietly while he assessed the threat. He showed her how to maintain composure, how to make minimal noise, and how to use the firelight to their advantage. Together, they managed the situation without harm, a small victory that reinforced their ability to face danger as a team. The woman realized that, though she had once felt helpless, She now possessed skills and instincts that allowed her to act decisively in moments of fear. By the time the moon rose high in the sky, casting silver light across the forest, both of them were exhausted but alert. The warrior remained watchful, scanning the darkness with a careful eye, while she lay close to the fire, feeling protected, yet stronger than ever before. She understood that the choice he had made to stay with her despite the risks had changed everything. It was not simply about survival. It was about loyalty, trust, and a willingness to face danger together. That choice had created a bond neither could ignore. As the hours passed, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The quiet was interrupted only by the soft call of an owl or the rustle of leaves in the wind. The warrior reflected on the decision he had made, realizing that choosing to stay with her had brought both reward and responsibility. He had sacrificed some of the absolute freedom he had always valued. But in return, he had gained companionship, trust, and a sense of purpose that went beyond survival. He had chosen connection over solitude, and that choice had begun to shape the next chapters of their journey. When dawn approached, the first light revealed the forest in soft shades of green and gold. The woman awoke, feeling a mixture of relief and anticipation. The night had passed without incident, and she had survived alongside someone she trusted deeply. She looked at the warrior, who remained vigilant, and understood that the challenges ahead would be numerous. Yet there was a quiet confidence in her heart. She now knew that together, they could face whatever obstacles the world placed before them. As they prepared to move on, the warrior reminded her of the lessons she had learned: to observe the environment carefully, to trust her instincts, and to remain calm in the face of danger. She nodded, eager to continue, and together, they stepped forward, ready to face the unknown. Though the forest remained full of risks, the bond they had forged, the shared experiences, and the trust between them provided a strength neither had anticipated. The journey ahead would test them, but they were prepared to meet every challenge, side by side, with courage, skill, and unwavering loyalty. The day stretched ahead with more obstacles, but also more opportunities for learning and growth. Fallen trees, rocky inclines, and hidden streams tested their endurance, while subtle signs in the forest taught them to move with care and awareness. Each challenge they overcame strengthened their bond and reinforced the lessons they had already begun to master. They were no longer merely surviving. They were thriving together, adapting to the wilderness, and finding comfort in the knowledge that they could rely on each other. By nightfall, they had reached a small, secluded valley surrounded by trees. The warrior selected a hidden spot for their camp, carefully arranging a fire and shelter to minimize exposure to potential dangers. They rested near the fire, sharing a simple meal, and reflected on the day's journey. She realized how much she had learned, not only about survival, but about trust, resilience, and the strength that comes from connection. He, in turn, acknowledged the depth of his choice to remain by her side, facing risks together, and understood that their bond was now an unbreakable part of their journey. The morning sun rose gently over the valley, painting the forest in shades of gold and green. Birds chirped softly, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of wildflowers and damp earth. The Apache warrior and the young woman awoke from their rest, feeling the warmth of the fire fading into the cool morning air. Their journey had been long, challenging, and filled with moments that tested both skill and courage. Yet, through every obstacle, they had grown stronger together. Their bond deepened by trust, shared experience, and the knowledge that they could rely on each other in ways neither had imagined. As they prepared to move on, the woman looked at the warrior and realized how much he had changed her world. She had been alone for so long, forced to navigate hardships without guidance or protection. Her confidence had grown not just from learning survival skills, but from the understanding that someone cared for her, someone who had chosen to stand by her side despite the dangers. She felt a quiet sense of gratitude and admiration, knowing that his presence had given her a chance to reclaim her strength and hope. The warrior, in turn, reflected on the journey that had brought them together. For years, he had valued freedom above all else, moving alone through the wilderness, surviving through skill and vigilance. Yet, in choosing to stay with her, he had discovered something deeper: connection, loyalty, and the quiet joy of shared purpose. The bond they had formed was not simply about survival. It was about trust, respect, and the willingness to face life's challenges together. Each choice, each shared moment of danger or comfort, had created a foundation that neither could ignore. Their path that day took them along a gentle slope that overlooked the river they had first camped beside. The water sparkled in the sunlight, a reminder of the journey they had undertaken and the lessons they had learned. They paused for a moment, taking in the beauty of the forest, feeling the calm that came from knowing they had each other. It was a rare peace, one that neither had experienced in years of solitude and hardship. She turned to him, a smile spreading across her face, and said quietly, "I never thought I could feel safe again, or that I would find someone I could trust so completely." He looked at her, his expression soft but steady. "Trust is earned, and you have earned it," he replied. "It is not given lightly, and it is not easily broken. You have shown courage, patience, and strength, and for that, I am proud to stand with you." His words were sincere, carrying the weight of experience and the rare vulnerability of a man who had lived most of his life alone. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mix of relief, gratitude, and quiet joy. For the first time, she felt truly seen and valued, not just for her resilience, but for the person she was beneath the hardships. The day continued with more challenges, though none as threatening as the ones they had faced before. Fallen trees, rocky inclines, and thick undergrowth tested their endurance, yet each obstacle was overcome through teamwork and careful observation. The warrior guided her with patience, teaching her to anticipate difficulties and remain calm under pressure. She, in turn, applied the lessons she had learned, moving with confidence and awareness. Their coordination had become almost instinctive, a reflection of the bond they had forged through countless shared experiences. As the afternoon sun began to dip toward the horizon, they came across a small clearing filled with wildflowers and soft grass. It was a place of rare beauty, almost untouched by human hands. The warrior motioned for them to rest, and they sat together, feeling the warmth of the earth beneath them and the gentle breeze brushing against their faces. For a moment, they allowed themselves to simply be, taking in the quiet serenity and reflecting on how far they had come. She marveled at the journey, the challenges, the lessons, the dangers, and most of all, the choice he had made to stay with her. That evening, as they built a small fire and prepared their meal, the woman realized how much she had grown. She was no longer the frightened, vulnerable person she had been when they first met. She had learned to move with caution, to anticipate danger, and to trust her instincts. But beyond survival, she had learned to trust another human being, to accept care, and to recognize the strength that comes from connection. She felt a deep sense of gratitude toward the warrior, who had not only protected her, but had also shown her that life could be faced together, with courage and mutual respect. The warrior, too, reflected on the growth he had witnessed. He had chosen to remain with her, risking his freedom and safety, and in doing so, he had discovered a new kind of purpose. Protecting her, teaching her, and sharing his life had brought a fulfillment that he had never known. He realized that freedom alone was not enough. Connection, loyalty, and trust gave life meaning in ways that solitude could not. The choice to stay had changed him as much as it had changed her, opening his heart to experiences he had long denied himself. As night fell over the valley, the fire casting flickering shadows, they spoke quietly of the future. Neither knew what awaited them beyond the forest, or what dangers might still lie ahead. Yet there was no fear, only a shared determination to face whatever came together. The warrior taught her to observe the stars, to understand the subtle shifts in wind and weather, and to anticipate challenges with awareness and calm. She absorbed every lesson, not merely for survival, but as a symbol of the trust and respect that had grown between them. Throughout the night, they shared stories, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection. She spoke of dreams she had long buried, hopes she had feared were impossible, and the small joys she had once overlooked. He shared tales of the wilderness, of lessons learned from his tribe, and the experiences that had shaped him into the person she now knew. Each word, each story, strengthened the bond that had begun when she first whispered her plea. It was a bond built not only on survival, but on mutual respect, understanding, and a recognition of the courage each had shown. By the time the first light of dawn touched the valley, they had reached a sense of balance. The woman felt empowered, confident, and secure, knowing she had someone who would stand by her side through hardship and uncertainty. The warrior felt fulfilled, aware that his choice to stay had brought not only companionship, but also a deeper purpose and connection than he had ever experienced alone. Together, they had faced danger, learned from one another, and forged a partnership that neither could have anticipated at the beginning of their journey. As they prepared to move on once more, they knew the forest still held challenges, but they also understood that they had everything they needed to face them. Trust, skill, courage, and mutual care were their greatest tools. The warrior and the woman stepped forward into the unknown, not as a protector and a dependent, but as equals in experience, bound by shared hardships and the knowledge that together they could overcome anything. The days that followed were filled with both trials and moments of peace. They crossed rivers, climbed hills, and navigated dense forests, each challenge strengthening their bond and their reliance on one another. The woman grew more skilled and confident, the warrior more at peace with the choice he had made. They learned to laugh in moments of relief, to celebrate small victories, and to draw comfort from the simple act of being together. Each step they took reinforced the lesson that connection and loyalty could be as vital as any survival skill. Eventually, they reached a place that offered not only safety, but also a sense of permanence. A quiet valley with fertile soil, abundant water, and protection from harsh weather. They decided to settle temporarily, building a small shelter and establishing a routine. The woman helped with gathering food, tending small fires, and maintaining the shelter, applying everything she had learned from the warrior. He continued to teach, guiding her with patience and encouragement, but also allowing her independence and growth. In this shared life, they found balance, comfort, and the quiet satisfaction of a bond forged in trust and mutual respect. Time passed, and their companionship deepened. They faced challenges together, celebrated victories, and supported one another through moments of fear and doubt. The warrior discovered that true freedom included the choice to care, the willingness to be vulnerable, and the strength to stand with someone else. The woman discovered that courage could take many forms: resilience in the face of danger, trust in another human being, and the strength to embrace life even after hardship. Together, they had found a life richer and fuller than either could have imagined alone. In the quiet evenings, sitting by the fire or watching the sun rise over the valley, they often reflected on the journey that had brought them together. It had begun with a chance encounter, a plea for safety, and a decision that changed everything. The woman's whispered words, "Please, only tonight," had sparked a choice that led to companionship, trust, and shared purpose. The warrior's decision to stay had created not only protection and survival, but also connection, meaning, and love in its simplest, most profound form. And so, in the safety of the forest, surrounded by the beauty of nature and the strength of their bond, they built a life together. A life where trust, respect, and courage guided every action. where each challenge was faced as a team, and where the lessons learned through hardship created a foundation for hope, resilience, and enduring companionship. Through their journey, they discovered that the heart's choices could shape destiny, and that even in a world full of uncertainty, connection, loyalty, and care could create a life worth living.